The knife sliced through the air, missing my ear by a hair's breadth. I froze, my heart pounding as I stared at my mother-in-law, Jane, who stood there with a maniacal grin, brandishing the cake knife like a weapon. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Ava dear," she cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. My hand must have slipped. "Here, let me cut you a slice of cake." Cake. I stepped back, my hands trembling. "No thank you, Jane. I think I've lost my appetite." Matthew, my husband, rushed to my side. "Mom, what the hell? You could have hurt Ava." Jane's face crumpled into a mask of innocence. "Oh, Matthew, don't be silly. It was an accident. Ava knows I'd never hurt her intentionally, don't you, dear?" I bit my tongue, fighting the urge to scream. This was supposed to be a joyous family gathering to celebrate Matthew's promotion, but leave it to Jane to turn it into a nightmare. "I think we should go," I whispered to Matthew, tugging at his sleeve. He nodded, his jaw clenched. "Yeah, I think that's best. Dad, we're heading out." George, Matthew's father, looked up from his plate, bewildered. "But you've barely touched your food. What's the rush?" "Ask your wife," Matthew snapped, grabbing our coats. As we made our way to the door, Jane's saccharine voice followed us. "Leaving so soon? But I made your favorite dessert, Matthew. Don't you want to stay?" I could see the conflict in Matthew's eyes. He loved his mother despite her quirks, but he loved me too, and I knew he was torn. "We'll take some to go, Mom," he said finally, his voice strained. Jane's eyes narrowed, but she plastered on a smile. "Of course, darling. Let me wrap that up for you." As she disappeared into the kitchen, I turned to Matthew. "We can't keep doing this," I hissed. "Your mother is out of control." He ran a hand through his hair, sighing. I know. But what can I do? She's my mother." "She's a menace," I retorted. "And if we don't do something, she's going to destroy our marriage." Before Matthew could respond, Jane reappeared, holding a Tupperware container. "Here you go, sweetie. I made sure to give you an extra large piece." As Matthew took the container, Jane's eyes locked with mine, the hatred in her gaze unmistakable. "Drive safe now," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "And Ava dear, do try to be more careful around sharp objects. We wouldn't want any accidents." I felt a chill run down my spine as we left the house. In the car, I turned to Matthew. "You heard that, right? That wasn't just me." He sighed, starting the engine. "I heard it. Look, I'll talk to her, okay? She'll come around eventually." I snorted. "Yeah, right? And pigs might fly." As we drove home in tense silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Jane had always disliked me, but tonight felt different, more dangerous. I glanced at the Tupperware container on my lap, suddenly suspicious. "Matthew, pull over." "What? Why?" "Just do it." He complied, and I got out of the car, opening the container. The smell hit me first, acrid and wrong. I dumped the contents onto the grass and gasped. "Matthew, look at this." He came around the car, his eyes widening as he saw the cake. It was laced with something, tiny white crystals that definitely weren't sugar. "Oh my God," he whispered, "she wouldn't?" But we both knew the truth. Jane had crossed the line, and there was no going back. As we stood there staring at the tainted cake in the moonlight, I knew our lives would never be the same. The war with Jane had begun, and I was determined to win, no matter the cost. I stared at the photo album, my fingers tracing the edges of a picture from 5 years ago. There I was, beaming in my white dress, Matthew at my side, and there, just behind us, was Jane, her smile as brittle as glass. "Penny for your thoughts." Matthew's voice startled me from my reverie. I snapped the album shut, just remembering the day I met your mother. God, I was so naive. Matthew sighed, settling beside me on the couch. "You couldn't have known, Ava. None of us did. But I should have. The signs were there from the very beginning." I closed my eyes, remembering that fateful day 5 years ago. Matthew and I had just gotten engaged and were heading to his parents' house for dinner. I was nervous, eager to make a good impression. Jane had opened the door, her perfectly coiffed hair and immaculate outfit making me feel underdressed in my work clothes. "You must be Ava," she'd said, her eyes sweeping over me critically. "I thought you'd be taller." I'd laughed it off then, chalking it up to nerves, but as the evening wore on, Jane's barbs became sharper, more pointed. "So Ava," she'd said over dessert, "Matthew tells me you're quite career-focused. I do hope you'll find time for a family. A woman's most important job is being a mother, after all. I'd nearly choked on my coffee. Well, I believe a woman can have both a career and a family, I'd replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Jane's eyes had narrowed. How modern of you. The tension in the room had been palpable. George, bless him, had tried to change the subject, but Jane wasn't done. And what exactly do your parents think of your ambitions? She'd asked, her voice dripping with disdain. I'd straightened my spine, meeting her gaze. My parents are proud of me. They've always encouraged me to follow my dreams. Jane had sniffed. I see. Well, I suppose not everyone values tradition these days. The memory faded, and I found myself back in the present, anger bubbling in my chest. She hated me from the start, Matthew, I said, my voice tight. And now she's trying to poison us, literally. Matthew ran a hand through his hair, his face a mask of anguish. I know, but what can we do? She's my mother. I stood up, pacing the room. We need to confront her, make her understand that her behavior is unacceptable. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Stay away from my son, you gold-digging harlot, or else. I showed the message to Matthew, watching the color drain from his face. This has gone too far, he muttered, pulling out his own phone. I'm calling her right now. As Matthew dialed, the doorbell rang. We exchanged a wary glance. I'll get it, I said, moving towards the door. I opened it to find Jane standing there, a saccharine smile on her face and a casserole dish in her hands. Surprise, she chirped. I thought I'd drop by with a little home-cooked meal. You two must be so busy with your careers, you probably don't have time for proper nutrition. I stood frozen, my mind racing. Behind me, I could hear Matthew's voice rising as he argued with someone on the phone. Jane's eyes narrowed. Aren't you going to invite me in, dear? I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. Jane, I don't think. Mom, Matthew appeared behind me, his face a storm of emotions. What are you doing here? Jane's smile never wavered. Just bringing my favorite couple a little treat. Won't you let me in? I glanced at the casserole dish, remembering the tainted cake. My stomach churned. Actually, Jane, I said, finding my voice at last, we need to talk about boundaries, respect, and your recent actions. Jane's smile faltered for a moment before returning, brighter and more menacing than ever. Oh, Ava, she purred, pushing past me into the house. I think it's high time we had a little chat, indeed. As the door closed behind her, I caught Matthew's eye. The look we shared was clear. This confrontation was long overdue, and there was no telling how it would end. I never thought I'd dread checking my mailbox, but here I was, heart pounding as I reached for the stack of envelopes. Bills, junk mail, and there it was, another pink envelope reeking of Jane's cloying perfume. With trembling hands, I tore it open. Inside was a cutesy card with kittens on the front. The message inside made my blood run cold. Tick-tock, dear. Your biological clock is running out. Matthew deserves a real family. I crumpled the card, fury rising in my chest. This was the third one this week. Jane's campaign of psychological warfare was relentless. As I stormed back to the house, I nearly collided with our neighbor, Mrs. Simmons. Oh, Ava, she exclaimed, her eyes narrowing. I was just coming to see you. I forced a smile. Hi, Mrs. Simmons. What can I do for you? She pursed her lips. Well, I couldn't help but notice that poor Jane has been looking after your garden lately. It's so kind of her, considering her health issues. I blinked, confused. I'm sorry, what? Mrs. Simmons tutted. Don't play dumb, dear. Jane told us all about how you've been neglecting her, refusing to help with her doctor's appointments, and ignoring her calls. It's shameful, really, she declared. My jaw dropped. That's not true at all. Jane has been. Save your excuses, Mrs. Simmons cut me off. We all know the truth. You're too wrapped up in your career to care about family. No wonder you haven't given Matthew children yet. She turned on her heel and marched away, leaving me stunned and humiliated on my own doorstep. Inside, I found Matthew at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. Matt, I said softly, what's wrong? He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. My boss called. Apparently, someone's been sending anonymous emails to the company claiming I'm unstable and unfit for my position. They're considering letting me go. My heart sank. Oh, Matt, I'm so sorry. Do you think? He nodded grimly. It has to be her. Who else would do this? I sank into the chair beside him, my mind reeling. She's destroying our lives, Matt. The neighbors think I'm neglecting her. She's trying to get you fired. What's next? Matthew reached for my hand. We need to confront her together. This has to stop. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Check your email, sweetheart. You might find something interesting. With a sense of dread, I opened my inbox. There, in bold letters, was a message from my company's HR department regarding your resignation. No, I whispered, my voice breaking. She didn't. Matthew peered over my shoulder, his face darkening. She faked your resignation. That's it. We're going over there right now. As we grabbed our keys and headed for the door, it burst open. There stood Jane, her face a mask of concern. Oh, my dears, she cried. I came as soon as I heard. Ava, losing your job like that, and Matthew, those terrible rumors at work. You poor things must be devastated. I stared at her, speechless with rage. How dare she stand there pretending to care when she was the cause of all this misery? Matthew stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. Cut the act, Mom. We know what you've been doing. Jane's eyes widened in feigned innocence. What on earth do you mean, sweetheart? I'm only here to help. Help? I exploded. You call this helping? You've been trying to ruin our lives. Jane's facade cracked for a moment, a flash of malice in her eyes. I'm only doing what's best for my son. He deserves better than you. The tension in the room was palpable. Matthew stood between us, torn between the woman he loved and the mother who raised him. Enough, he said finally. This ends now. We're going to sit down and hash this out once and for all. As we moved to the living room, the air thick with unspoken accusations, I couldn't shake the feeling that this confrontation would change everything. For better or worse, our family would never be the same after today. The Christmas tree lights twinkled mockingly as I stood in the corner of Jane and George's living room, clutching my glass of wine like a lifeline. The annual family gathering had barely begun, and already I felt like I was suffocating. More eggnog, anyone? Jane's saccharine voice cut through the forced cheer, her eyes locked onto mine with a predatory gleam. Ava dear, you're not drinking. Surely you're not expecting. The room fell silent. I felt the weight of everyone's stares, especially Matthew's. We'd been trying for a baby for months with no success. It was a sore point, one Jane loved to prod. No, Jane, I said, my voice tight, just watching my alcohol intake. Such a shame, she continued. You know, at your age, every month counts, tick-tock, as they say. I saw Matthew tense, ready to intervene, but I shook my head slightly. I wouldn't let her bait me, not today. As the evening wore on, Jane's barbs became sharper, more frequent. She regaled the family with stories of Matthew's childhood, pointedly mentioning how she'd given up her career to raise him. Of course, some women prefer their jobs to family, she said, her gaze boring into me. I suppose that's why some never become mothers. That was it. I slammed my glass down, wine sloshing over the rim. Enough, Jane. Just say what you really mean. The room went deadly quiet. Jane's eyes widened in fox innocence. Whatever do you mean, Ava? You think I'm a failure as a wife because I work, because I haven't given you grandchildren yet? Well, guess what? My worth isn't determined by my ability to procreate. Jane's mask slipped, revealing the spite beneath. No, your worth is determined by how you treat family, and you, my dear, are sorely lacking. Mom, Matthew interjected, but Jane was on a roll. You've torn this family apart, she hissed, with your selfish career ambitions and your inability to give Matthew children. He deserves better. I felt like I'd been slapped. Tears pricked my eyes as I looked around the room. George stared at his feet, avoiding conflict as usual. Matthew's cousins whispered among themselves, and Matthew just stood there frozen. In that moment, I'd never felt more alone. You want to know why we don't have kids yet, Jane? I said, my voice shaking. Because every doctor we've seen says the stress in our lives is affecting our fertility. And you know what the biggest source of that stress is? You. Gasps echoed around the room. Jane's face turned an alarming shade of red. How dare you blame me for your shortcomings? To confront her, ChatGPT, she shrieked. Matthew, are you going to let her speak to me like this? All eyes turned to Matthew. This was it, the moment he had to choose, his wife or his mother. But Matthew remained silent, his face a mask of anguish. and in his silence, I heard everything I needed to know. "Merry Christmas, everyone," I said quietly, grabbing my coat. "I think it's best if I go." As I walked out into the cold night air, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, half hoping to see Matthew. Instead, it was George. "Ava, wait," he said, his voice gentle. "I'm so sorry. What Jane said. It wasn't right." I smiled sadly. "But you didn't stop her, did you, George? None of you ever do." He looked away, shame written across his face. "You're right, and that needs to change." As I drove home alone, tears streaming down my face, I realized something had to give. I couldn't keep living like this, caught between my love for Matthew and the toxicity of his family. It was time to make a choice, and as the Christmas lights faded in my rearview mirror, I knew exactly what I had to do. I sat on our living room couch, staring at the packed suitcase by the door. 3 days had passed since the Christmas disaster, and Matthew still hadn't come home. My phone buzzed, another text from him. "I'm sorry, I need more time." More time for what? To choose between his wife and his mother? The thought made my stomach churn. A knock at the door startled me. I opened it, half expecting to see Matthew. Instead, I found myself face to face with George. "Ava," he said, his voice heavy with concern. "May I come in?" I nodded, stepping aside. George entered, his eyes landing on my suitcase. "You're leaving?" he asked, alarm evident in his tone. I shrugged, fighting back tears. "I don't know, maybe. I can't keep living like this, George." He sighed, sinking into an armchair. "I understand, and that's why I'm here. It's time we talked about Jane." My heart raced. Was this another ambush? But George's next words shocked me to my core. "I'm leaving her, Ava. I filed for divorce." I gaped at him, struggling to process this information. "What? But why now?" George's eyes met mine, filled with remorse and determination. "Because I've been a coward for far too long. What Jane did at Christmas was the last straw. I've enabled her behavior for years, and it stops now." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small notebook. "I've been keeping track of Jane's episodes, the lies, the manipulation, everything. I thought maybe if I documented it, I'd find the courage to confront her." I took the notebook from him, flipping through the pages filled with dates and detailed accounts of Jane's actions. "George, it's the truth, Ava," he said, his voice breaking. "I should have stood up to her years ago, but I was too afraid. I'm so sorry for everything she's put you through." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "Thank you, George. This means more than you know." He reached out, squeezing my hand. "You're a good person, Ava. You deserve better than this. And so does Matthew." As George left, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of the end of Jane's reign of terror. Maybe, just maybe, we could all find some peace. Later that evening, I sat down with my phone, my heart heavy with uncertainty. I needed to talk to Matthew to tell him everything George had said. But as I dialed his number, the door creaked open and Matthew walked in, looking exhausted. "Ava," he said, his voice soft and full of regret. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do." I stood up, walking over to him. "Matt, we need to talk." George was here. He filed for divorce from Jane. Matthew's eyes widened in shock. "He did?" I nodded, holding up the notebook. "He's been documenting everything. The lies, the manipulation, all of it. He wants to make things right." Matthew sank into the couch, his head in his hands. I can't believe it. After all these years, I sat down beside him, taking his hand. "Matt, we can't keep living like this. I love you, but something has to change. We need to stand up to her together." But I never did, until now. As George flipped through the pages, recounting incident after incident, I felt a mix of vindication and horror. Jane's toxicity ran deeper than I ever imagined. "Does Matthew know?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. George shook his head. "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first, to apologize for not standing up for you sooner, and to ask for your help." "My help?" "Yes, Matthew, he's struggling, Ava. Jane's got her claws in deep. He needs us, both of us, to show him the truth." Just then, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Matthew. "I'm coming home. We need to talk." I showed George the message, my heart pounding. "He's on his way." George stood, determination etched on his face. "Good. It's time we face this as a family, a real family." As we waited for Matthew, I felt a strange mix of hope and fear. Could this be the turning point we needed? The sound of a key in the lock made us both turn. Matthew walked in, his eyes widening at the sight of his father. "Dad, what are you doing here?" George stepped forward, placing a hand on Matthew's shoulder. "Son, we need to talk about your mother." Matthew's face hardened. "If you're here to defend her—" "No," George interrupted. "I'm here to tell you the truth. All of it." For the next hour, George laid it all out. Years of manipulation, lies, and toxic behavior. Matthew listened in stunned silence, his face a storm of emotions. When George finished, Matthew turned to me, his eyes brimmy with tears. "Ava, I'm so sorry. I had no idea it was this bad." I took his hand, squeezing it gently. "It's not your fault, Matt, but we can't go on like this. We have to make a choice." Matthew nodded, a new resolve in his eyes. "You're right, both of you are. It's time we stood up to Mom together." As the three of us sat there planning our next move, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be tough, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone in this fight. George cleared his throat. "There's one more thing you both should know. I've decided to divorce Jane." The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. This was it, the point of no return. Whatever happened next would change our family forever. I looked at Matthew, seeing the same mix of fear and determination in his eyes that I felt. We were at a crossroads, and the path we chose would define our future. So I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "What do we do now?" The courthouse loomed before us, a monolithic symbol of the battle we were about to face. George's hand trembled as he clutched the divorce papers, his face a mix of determination and fear. Matthew stood beside him, jaw clenched, while I hovered nearby, my heart racing. "Are you sure about this, Dad?" Matthew asked, his voice barely above a whisper. George nodded, his eyes steely. "It's time, son. We can't let her toxicity poison our lives any longer." As we climbed the steps, a familiar voice rang out behind us. Well, what a touching family outing." We turned to see Jane, her lips curved in a cruel smile. She was impeccably dressed as always, but there was a wild look in her eyes that sent chills down my spine. "Mom," Matthew started, but Jane cut him off with a wave of her hand. "Save it," she spat. "I know what this is. You're all conspiring against me, my own family, turning their backs on me." George stepped forward, his voice steady. "Jane, this isn't a conspiracy. It's the consequence of your actions. We're here to file for divorce." Jane's face contorted with rage. "Divorce? You can't divorce me. I've given you everything, my youth, my dreams, my life. And you've taken just as much from us," I found myself saying, surprising even myself with my boldness. Jane's eyes locked onto mine, blazing with hatred. "You," she hissed, "this is all your fault. You've poisoned them against me." Before I could react, Jane lunged at me, her manicured nails raking across my face. I stumbled backward, shocked by the sudden attack. Matthew jumped between us, restraining his mother as she thrashed and screamed. "Let go of me. She's ruined everything. Our family, our lives." Security guards rushed over, pulling Jane away. As they escorted her off, she turned back, her face a mask of venom. "This isn't over," she snarled. "I'll destroy you all for this betrayal." Inside the courthouse, we sat in stunned silence, waiting for our turn to file the papers. My cheeks stung where Jane had scratched me, a physical reminder of the emotional wounds she'd inflicted over the years. "I'm so sorry, Ava," Matthew murmured gently, touching my face. "I never thought she'd— God, what have we done?" I took his hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "We're doing what's right, Matt. It's not easy, but it's necessary." George nodded, his face ashen. "I should have done this years ago." "Maybe then." He trailed off, but we all knew what he meant. "Maybe then things wouldn't have gotten this bad. Maybe we could have salvaged some semblance of a normal family." As we waited, my phone buzzed incessantly. Messages flooded in from friends, neighbors, even colleagues. Jane had wasted no time spreading her version of events, telling everyone that we had you committed, George. I scrolled through the messages, accusations that we were trying to steal your assets and destroy your reputation. George's face fell. "Of course she is. It's always been about control with Jane. If she can't have it, she'll burn everything to the ground." Just then, Matthew's phone rang. He answered, his face growing paler by the second. "It's my boss," he whispered, covering the mouthpiece. "Jane's called the company, claiming I'm having a mental breakdown and need to be placed on leave." I felt the walls closing in. Jane's web of lies and manipulation was spreading, threatening to unravel everything we'd worked for. Our careers, our reputations, our very lives were hanging in the balance. As Matthew argued with his boss, trying to explain the situation, I caught George's eye. The same thought passed between us. How far would Jane go in her quest for revenge? And more importantly, how could we stop her before she destroyed everything we held dear? The court clerk called our name, jolting us back to reality. This was it, the point of no return. As we stood to follow her into the judge's chambers, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a war we might not be prepared to fight. The aftermath of George's divorce filing was like a tornado tearing through our lives. Jane's venomous lies spread through the community like wildfire, leaving destruction in their wake. I stood on our front porch, watching as yet another neighbor hurried past, averting their eyes. The isolation was suffocating. George's voice called from inside, "You need to see this." I rushed back in to find George and Matthew huddled around a laptop. On the screen was a local community forum, ablaze with posts about us. "She's telling everyone I'm abusive," Matthew said, his voice cracking. "That I've been manipulating Dad into the divorce, that we're after his money." I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. This is insane. We have to do something. George nodded, a determined glint in his eye. "I've been making some calls. It's time we fought back." Over the next few days, George became a man possessed. He went door to door, speaking to neighbors and showing them his notebook of Jane's misdeeds. I watched in awe as he transformed from the passive man I'd known into a fierce defender of the truth. But Jane wasn't going down without a fight. As George made headway with the neighbors, she upped her game. Suddenly, she was everywhere. At the grocery store, the park, even outside my office, always playing the part of the frail, wronged woman. "Did you see her at the pharmacy?" Mrs. Simmons cornered me one afternoon. Poor dear could barely walk. "Are you sure you're not being too harsh on her?" I bit back a scream of frustration. "Mrs. Simmons, it's all an act. Jane is." Now, she cut me off. "I know you're going through a rough patch, but let's not say things we can't take back." As Mrs. Simmons walked away, I felt the walls closing in. How could we fight an enemy who wielded sympathy as a weapon? The answer came in an unexpected form. One evening, as we sat around our dining table plotting our next move, a knock at the door interrupted us. Jane's phone buzzed. "It's Dr. Patel," George said, frowning. "Jane's doctor." We listened in stunned silence as George spoke to the doctor. When he hung up, his face was a mix of triumph and disgust. "Jane's been faking her health issues," he said. "Dr. Patel has been suspicious for a while and is willing to testify that there's nothing physically wrong with her." It was the break we needed. Armed with this information, we launched a counter-offensive. George spoke to the local paper, sharing his story and the truth about Jane's deception. Matthew reached out to his company, explaining the situation with Dr. Patel's statement backing him. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Neighbors who had shunned us started to reach out, offering apologies and support. Jane's web of lies began to unravel. But just as we thought we were gaining ground, disaster struck. I woke up one morning to find our front yard filled with news vans and reporters. "Ava," Matthew called from the living room. "You need to see this." On the TV, Jane stood before a sea of microphones, tears streaming down her face. "My own family," she sobbed. "They've turned against me all because I dared to speak the truth about their greed and manipulation." My heart sank as I watched the sympathetic nods of the reporters. Jane had taken her performance to a national stage. As the doorbell began to ring incessantly with reporters clamoring for our side of the story, I felt a wave of despair wash over me. How could we possibly fight this? Our private family drama had become a public spectacle, and Jane was playing the role of the victim to perfection. Matthew turned to me, his face pale. "What do we do now?" I looked from him to George, both men looking more defeated than I'd ever seen them. This was it, the moment that would define our future. We could either crumble under the pressure or stand up and fight. Taking a deep breath, I squared my shoulders. "We tell our story," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "All of it. No more hiding, no more shame." It's time the world knew the truth about Jane. As I reached for the door, ready to face the media storm outside, I silently prayed we were making the right choice. Because if this didn't work, we'd be giving Jane exactly what she wanted: our complete and utter destruction. The courtroom fell silent as Jane took the stand, her face a mask of practiced sorrow. I gripped Matthew's hand tightly, my heart pounding. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. "Mrs. Thompson," our lawyer began, "can you explain why you've been spreading false information about your family?" Jane's eyes welled with tears. "I've only ever told the truth. My family has abandoned me, left me to suffer alone." I felt a surge of anger, but before I could react, our lawyer produced a familiar notebook, George's meticulous record of Jane's behavior. "Your Honor," he said, "I'd like to present evidence of Mrs. Thompson's long history of manipulation and deceit." As our lawyer read excerpt after damning excerpt, I watched Jane's facade crumble. Her eyes darted around the courtroom, searching for sympathy but finding none. Then came the coup de grace. Dr. Patel's testimony. He calmly explained how Jane had fabricated her health issues, using them to garner sympathy and control her family. In my professional opinion, Dr. Patel concluded, Mrs. Thompson is in perfect health. Her claims of debilitating illness are entirely false. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Jane's face contorted with rage, her mask finally slipping completely. "You ungrateful wretches," she shrieked, pointing at us. "After everything I've done for you?" As security restrained her, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The truth was out, and Jane could no longer hide behind her lies. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. Jane was ordered to cease all contact with us, and George's divorce was finalized. As we left the courthouse, a crowd of reporters waited. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," one called out, "how do you feel about the verdict?" I looked at Matthew and George, seeing my own mix of relief and sadness mirrored in their eyes. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward. "We're relieved that the truth has come to light," I said, my voice steady. "But more than that, we're hopeful that we can now move forward and heal as a family." In the weeks that followed, life slowly began to return to normal. Our neighbors, once wary, now greeted us warmly. Matthew's company, satisfied with the court's findings, welcomed him back with open arms. But the biggest surprise came on a quiet Sunday morning. As Matthew and I sat at the breakfast table, I felt a sudden wave of nausea. "Ava," Matthew's voice was concerned, "are you okay?" I looked up at him, a smile spreading across my face as realization dawned. "Matthew, I think I'm pregnant." The joy that filled our home that day was indescribable. When we shared the news with George, his eyes filled with happy tears. "Life finds a way," he said, hugging us both, even in the darkest times. As I stood there surrounded by the love of my family, I realized something profound. The ordeal with Jane, as painful as it had been, had made us stronger. We had faced the storm together and come out the other side, battered but unbroken. Months later, as I held our newborn daughter in my arms with Matthew and George by my side, I felt a sense of peace I'd never known before. We had weathered the worst and emerged victorious, not just over Jane's toxicity, but over the fear and doubt that had plagued us for so long. "Welcome to the world, little one," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "You're born into a family that knows the true meaning of love and loyalty." Matthew squeezed my shoulder, his eyes shining with pride and love. "We've come so far," he murmured. George nodded, gently touching his granddaughter's cheek. "And we have so much to look forward to." As I gazed at my daughter's innocent face, I made a silent promise. She would grow up knowing only love and support, free from the toxic influences that had nearly torn us apart. We had broken the cycle and in doing so, given her the greatest gift of all, a family built on trust, respect, and unconditional love. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but I knew we could face anything as long as we stood together. We had weathered the storm, and now, at last, we could bask in the sunlight of a brighter tomorrow.